So let me go ahead and start my presentation. We can start with me. That's just fine. Get here and share my screen. I'm just going to stop your sharing and let me share that. Can everybody see the beginning of my presentation here? Looking good? Okay. All right. So as Sue said, my name is Joe Kerrigan. I am a senior security engineer with the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. My role is research-based. I'm not operational security. I do a lot of academic security, but I'm also involved in my own research as well. Let's see here. There we go. So normally when I'm giving a presentation like this, I like to start off with a very fun exercise. And unfortunately, since we're not meeting in person today, we can't really do this, but here's what I want you to do. I just want you to think of some hacks or data breaches that you've heard about that have happened. And just take about a second to think about it. And I'm sure that a couple of them come to mind, right? We all think of maybe the Target breach, or recently over the summer, we had the Twitter hack. That was a pretty interesting hack. Maybe you think about the Equifax breach, or perhaps the MyFitnessPal breach. These are all newsworthy breaches that were significant, and I don't mean to downplay them. And in fact, it's hard to do that. These were all significant breaches that impacted many of us. But it's interesting when you're talking about a security breach that nobody ever says something like the Broadway Grill in Seattle, or Schlotsky's Deli, or Mountain Mike's Pizza, or Casamia, or Active Networks. Nobody ever mentions these. But these companies all have one thing in common, and that is that they were all victims of a Russian man by the name of Roman Celesnev. And he was what the hacker community calls a carder. And he was active from 2003 to 2012, about 9 years. And a carder is someone who deals in stolen credit cards. They get the credit card information somehow, and then they sell it on a dark market. There are markets out there for these people to operate. The Department of Justice estimated his damages, or they listed his damages actually in the complaint at $169 million. That is just the damages they were able to attribute to him. He probably had a lot more than this, but when they investigated the Broadway Grill, investigators found data from 32,000 credit cards in plain text on a point of sale system for the Broadway Grill. The Broadway Grill did not survive this breach. They were actually litigated out of existence because of the amount of information that was leaked as a result of this attack. The way Roman Celesnev worked is he would search for remote desktop connections on the internet. And if he found them, he would try to brute force the passwords. If people had weak passwords on a remote desktop connection, he could get in. And once he saw he was on a point of sale system, he would install his software that would take the credit card information and then send it to him. And he had that all automated. He chose small businesses deliberately because they were easy targets. So we're going to talk more about this, but he did target specifically small and medium-sized businesses. The good news is he was found guilty and is now a guest of the United States government, and will be for the next number of years. His sentence was 27 years, but that doesn't stop the amount. It doesn't even help to recover the amount of damage that he did, especially to companies that are no longer in business. The most important thing, and the reason I use this as an example, is I want everyone to understand that that you are of value to malicious actors. A lot of people, when I speak to them, they have this attitude of nobody's interested in what I have because it's not very valuable. But you should understand that yes, you are a target, and everyone is worth something to a malicious actor. So let me ask a few questions, and you just answer these in your head. You think about whether or not you use these things. Do you have a bank account? Do you have a social security number, or perhaps an employee identification number? Do you have credit cards or debit cards that you use to pay for services for your business, for your small business? Do you handle other people's information, including employees? Do you provide any service where you have to maintain some address information, or perhaps you do tax preparation for somebody? That's a lot of valuable information. Is the information that you have necessary for you running your business? In other words, what would happen to your business if that information, that data was no longer available to you? Do you use computers at all? Any kind of computers? Malicious actors have ways to monetize all of these. In other words, they can find profit from any one of these pieces of data, any one of these bullet points I listed above. Many of these actors live in countries with very low income. So I think in Nigeria, the average or the median income is $2,700. So that's the kind of marketplace you're dealing with. If somebody can scam you out of $500 or $100, that's a good day for a lot of people around the world. And it's important. We live in America, which actually has a very high income per capita when compared to the rest of the world. And when you look at the rest of the world, that's not the case. So we are, as American citizens, big targets for these guys. I want to talk about some trends in cybercrime. And one of the biggest trends we're seeing right now is ransomware is increasing a lot. And the reason that ransomware is increasing is because it is effective. A lot of people, when they are infected with ransomware, really have no other option other than to pay the ransom. Some of the things we're seeing now is that these ransomware attacks are also being turned into data breaches, and that is directly a result of market forces. Because ransomware has been increasing, a lot of people have been also saying, okay, well, if I'm a victim of a ransomware attack, I want to make sure I can recover from that ransomware attack. So I'm going to go ahead and have backups of all my data that I can restore once I experience one of these attacks. Well, the attackers are subject to that economic force, and they have decided that what they're going to do now is that before they encrypt your data, they're going to steal it all. And then when they send you the ransom note, or they put the ransom note on your machine and you start communicating with them, they're going to say, oh, by the way, we have your data, and if you don't pay the ransom to decrypt it, we're going to release it or we're going to sell it. So that's a big trend that we're seeing in ransomware. They are targeting businesses with a low tolerance for downtime. This includes organizations like professional services, manufacturing, and government. Many of you guys probably fall into the professional services category. You do things for other people. That's professional services. And what's interesting is that they are actually calculating the ransoms based on revenue. Because they know how much, because they've stolen the data, they kind of have an idea of how much they can charge you to decrypt your data. They do that investigation. There's a group called the Celesnev group, that they are a ransomware group, and IBM estimates that they have made $81 million in 2020. That is a lot of money to make from a criminal operation. And that is just the estimate that IBM is making. This is, they've probably made a lot more than that. So what we're seeing is that these cybercrime organizations are actually becoming more like organizations. They're organized a lot like businesses. They have lead generation, and these are the people that will send you phishing emails. They have sales. These are the people that you talk to once you respond to a phishing email. They have service. They have management. Oh, the service, they even have customer service. Like, for example, if there are ransomware organizations that when they send you the keys to decrypt your data, if you're having difficulty, they will actually get on a Zoom call with you, or some kind of teleconferencing call, and walk you through the process. They actually have tech support to decrypt your data. And they do that because they know that if they don't do that, then other people will be less likely to pay the ransom. They have recruitment. This is an interesting new occurrence. The Celesnev, or the REvil group, has put $1 million in Bitcoin into a Russian hacker website to try to get people to join their operation. These folks have realized that they have a product, essentially, and what they're doing is they're going to a service model. They're doing ransomware as a service. So if a malicious actor out there wants to start being a malicious actor, there's somebody out there who wants to start being a malicious actor, they can team up with the REvil group, or Celesnev, and they can say, yeah, sure, I'll go out and find some people to encrypt their data, and they get about 70% of the profits, and the Celesnev group gets about 30%. They're actually doing this very much like a franchise business model. There are other things out there we've seen that are platforms that are essentially turnkey phishing kits. Now, we're all familiar with what phishing is and how it works. It's an email that gets sent to you, but these are kits that include phishing email templates. They include landing pages. They include software that harvests the credentials, because that's usually what they're looking for with a phishing kit with a link. Is they're looking for some kind of access to some kind of service, and those assets have value. The keyboard or username and password have value. They can sell those, and you can buy for about $50 an entire turnkey phishing kit that tells you everything from how to set up a server all the way down to how to launder the money that you've gotten from your criminal enterprise. And it's remarkably cheap, so anybody can just pick this up and do it. And that's really where the risk comes in. So why target a small business as opposed to targeting a large business? Number one, small businesses do not have large cybersecurity budgets. If you are a single person operating a business, or there's 2 or 3 people in your business, you don't have the money to have a cybersecurity budget, period. You may not even have dedicated IT resources. You may not have people that are IT people on your staff. You probably don't if you're a very small business. You probably pay somebody for that service if you don't do it yourself. They don't have the dedicated security resources. So this is kind of a reiteration of the previous point. But here's the other side of that token. By the same token, your assets are typically less valuable, right? So if you look at the Target breach, the assets there were valuable because they were so large. A credit card number sells for about $5 on the dark web if it's good. And if I can get 1 million of those, or however many million, that's a big payday. But if I go into a small business, I may only get 10, 20 of those. So that means that I'm going to want to get in there and move quickly as an attacker. I'm not going to do what the attackers in Target did. I'm not going to spend an entire summer going into your network, establishing presence and persistence. I'm just going to try to get you to give me the information as quickly as possible. So the economics of this will always count in terms of prevention. So make it as difficult for the malicious actors as you can. And in that vein, what is the biggest threat for the small business? And it is quite simply social engineering. And that's a fancy term. I don't know why we call it this, but we do in the industry. But it's essentially getting you to act in a manner that's against your interest. And the way it will manifest for businesses is most often just scams. And there are tons of ways that people are scammed. And we talk about that on the Hacking Humans podcast. But basically, here's how it works. Very simply, they try to get you to short circuit your thinking with some kind of emotional trigger. And we all have emotional triggers. In fact, on the podcast, I frequently will say, or occasionally I'll say, this is something that would absolutely work on me. And one of the prime examples is not actually a phishing scam, but it's a con artist scam or a pickpocket scam. If I'm with a child, let's say I have one of my kids are grown now, but let's say I'm younger and I have younger kids. There's a scam where they would target a kid and spray mustard on a kid, right? And then the kid goes up to his parents, and while the parents bend over to get the mustard off the kid, that's when they pick the parent's pocket. And that is absolutely something that would work on me. It would be something I'd lose my wallet in that case. So they short circuit your thinking with these emotional triggers, and they're usually using something like fear or greed. That's the two big things they use, and there almost always is some kind of artificial time constraint, like you need to handle this today. And then the other element of this is isolation. They're going to try to say, don't talk to anybody about this. Okay. So use these 3 items as red flags. So if you see someone is appealing to your fear or your greed, if they're telling you something needs to be done almost immediately, and they're trying to tell you not to talk to other people, this is probably a scam. That's the way scams operate. Why do people do this? Why is this so prevalent? It's because it's fast, cheap, and effective, and it can be conducted by anybody with little or no technical expertise. This harkens back to the phishing kit I was talking about. In 95% of all cyber events, an email is the first thing that the attackers do to get into the company. They may do a little bit of reconnaissance beforehand. In fact, if they're going like in Target, they did a lot of reconnaissance. But the first thing they're going to do is they're going to send an email. All right. So social engineering attacks come in a bunch of different shapes and sizes. We have phishing and spear phishing. Basically, phishing is I'm going to send out a bunch of emails and see who responds. Spear phishing is I know who I'm going to target and I'm going to write an email specifically for them, and I'm going to try to get them to respond. This is another thing that we're seeing a lot more of is impersonation, and particularly with business email compromise. And while this may not be something that happens in your organization, it's not just something that you'll be vulnerable from that perspective. It can happen in an organization with whom you do business. These folks have gotten a lot better over time, these impersonators. They are very good at mimicking the language and style of the people they're impersonating. So you will not even know that you're not speaking to somebody if they've been victimized by a business email compromise attack. They strike at exactly the right time. So the way this works is, let's say that you're talking to a company with whom you do business that provides you maybe materials for your business, and you will send an email that says, okay, I want to go ahead and purchase $1,000 worth of this supply. You'll get an email right back immediately that says, that's great, just wire the money to this account and we'll send you the supplies. Whenever there's anything like that, we'll talk more about how to prevent this, but you should be aware that might be a scam. Vishing is just another fancy term for phone scams. You'll get a lot of these phone calls. They'll just dial at random and they'll try to take advantage of you. This is typically something that older people are more vulnerable to. I've heard a lot of stories about older people getting hit by vishing scams. Remember that distraction is a big factor on whether you click a link. So when you're going to be responding to your email, just take that time to be dedicated and focused on your email. Don't try to multitask. Don't try to do other things. Just be present when you're looking at your email. That will protect you a lot. It's very, very practical advice there. So here's a current example. Sue actually sent this to me. This came from some scammer pretending to be with the Small Business Administration, and they are talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. And this is a program that the government offered, and they're essentially saying you have been given this loan by mistake, and you need to give us the money back. Right? If you respond to this email at sbaattorneys.com, which is a domain that they've purchased, which is not the legitimate domain, but it is a real domain on the internet, then you'll start getting processed in their sales organization, essentially. And I highlighted a few things here. Number one, I highlighted the very convincing looking domain name up here. I also highlighted down here the impending consequences of an audit and potential criminal liability. That's the fear factor. They're trying to put the fear of you being prosecuted in this. Here's your artificial time constraint right here. Since the deadline of May 7th, and they're saying this is already passed, so you're behind. So they're saying their artificial time constraint is like, oh, you're already late on this. Okay, this is a scam. This is not anything that anybody needs to respond to. And it's very cleverly crafted, but this one is actually not very well worded. And a lot of times we see that, but a lot less than we used to see the poor wording. So they're getting better at the wording. All right. So what can you do to protect yourself? And I have a couple of options here. I'm going to start with your technology. Use multi-factor authentication. This helps a lot. Now, there are multiple ways of doing multi-factor authentication. Whatever is available to you, you should use it. If it's just a text message that your phone that gets sent to your phone, use that. If they have a way for you to use an app like Google Authenticator, use that. If you can use something like a YubiKey, I'm trying to get that to show up on the screen. This is called Universal Two-Factor, and it's very good and very secure and very difficult to hack. Almost, in fact, there are no known vulnerabilities against this right now. This is a hardware token that you enter, and you can use this to authenticate yourself to cloud services like Google and Microsoft's cloud services. So use those when you have them available. Whatever is available, use it. It's far better than nothing at all. Okay. Implement it in your business and implement it in any company with whom you do business. So they're, particularly with cloud services and banks, because this is what attackers are going to go after. Practice good password hygiene. And by that, I mean, use long, complex passwords that you change with some regularity. Don't reuse passwords on multiple sites or services. And now I always have to sit here and wait for the groans when there's an audience here, but that is a lot of work, right? Well, there's a really simple solution that is use a password manager. This is just, then you only have to remember one password. If someone asks me what's my password to any of my services that I use, like Facebook or Twitter or even my bank or anything, I don't know the password. The password is stored in my password manager, which is protected with this key. So even if someone knew the password to my password manager, they couldn't get access to it because they don't have this physical key. Automate software updates and don't delay them, and reduce your surface area. If you don't need it, turn it off. This harkens back to the way Roman Celesnev got into these companies. They probably didn't need to have remote desktop protocol on their PCs. They may have done that because there was some company that they were contracting with that was providing technical support services, but those passwords should have been better managed and should have used better password hygiene. But if you don't need remote desktop protocol on your systems, turn it off. It's turned off by default, but it shouldn't be turned on. Have good backups and test them. Now we're talking about small businesses here. So a lot of small businesses, you can back up your data pretty easily just by using what do you call them? Removable hard drives or portable hard drives. You could probably back up all your data on a 3 terabyte portable hard drive, buy 2 of them and keep one of them off site. I see we're getting questions. I'll wait for questions till the end here. And then protect yourself with your policy. And this just means how you conduct business, right? Train yourself for social engineering attacks if you can do it. There are a couple of companies out there that will provide this training at very low cost. Examine your processes for vulnerability and then mitigate them, especially when it comes to making payments. Have a policy or just a way of doing it. When someone says, "Hey, I'm going to change the way I want you to pay me," don't respond to that in email. Go pick up the phone, make a phone call, or if this is someone you do business with face to face, talk to them in person or on a Zoom call. That's even better, or over Skype or something. Any unexpected requests or events. We see a lot of these things where people say, "Hey, I'm in a meeting right now and I really need your help." Okay, that's kind of an unexpected event and request, and almost always the lead into a scam. Culture, and this applies when you have a business, but if you're working on your own, you can also adopt this. It's okay to verify a request. Nobody's going to get mad at you if you call your bank and say, "Hey, is this actually you guys?" It's perfectly fine to slow down. A lot of these scams will become apparent to you that they're scams once you start talking to somebody about it, right? You say, "Hey, this guy is on the phone here and he says he wants to talk to me about this. And oh, you know what? None of this adds up. This is a scam." So take the time and just slow down. It's okay. Develop a business continuity plan and prepare for cyber events. And this would apply to companies that may be larger than the companies I'm talking to here, but still it's a good idea to understand that just have an idea of what you're going to do when there's a cybersecurity event. And if you're going to keep a plan like this, remember to print it out, because if you're hit with a ransomware attack and your computer's encrypted, you're not going to have access to your plan. So go ahead and print it out. And finally, I want to do some shameless self-promotion here. I really think that the Hacking Humans podcast is a great place to start. It's we talk about these social engineering attacks, and there have been studies that have shown that if you're aware of how these kind of manipulative practices work, that you're less prone to fall for them. So that's kind of the mission of the Hacking Humans podcast, is we tell you about the scams that are current and out there, and right now we're focusing a lot on election type scams. We've talked about a couple of election scams. Earlier this summer, we're talking about COVID scams. These scams are always going to be timely, and they're always going to cycle through things. Like, so after the election, guess what happens next? It's the holiday scams. And then guess what happens after the holiday scams? It's the tax season scams. They're always going to be circling with whatever's going on right now. That's why that example I showed you earlier is probably a very effective example, because it has it relates to a current event that you may or may not have participated in, that being the Paycheck Protection Program. And that's it for me. Sue, I'm going to stop sharing, and maybe we have some questions.
Yes, thanks so much. That was great information. Really appreciate all that. And my apologies to all of the attendees and to you, Joe. There was a mess up on our part, and the correct time wasn't put on the Attorney General's schedule because of our mess up. So apologize for him not being able to join us today. But one thing I do want to share, in case any of the participants feel like this is, more of a national or global issue, it is happening in Maryland. One of the examples that he was going to highlight talks about a small and medium-sized business that was home run, a family run trophy store in Maryland that had a ransomware attack, and that ransom was demanded in Bitcoin. And Joe, I think as you pointed out, these criminals have made a business out of their cybersecurity hacking, and they did a very professionally executed attack. And then they offered instructions on how to be able to pay in Bitcoin because this family probably didn't know how to do that.
That's right.
So it shut the business down for a week as they work to, get themselves back online. But it is happening in Maryland, and it is prevalent.
Now, did the business recover, or did they pay the ransom or not?
I believe they did. I don't know all of the details because of the mess up on our end where the Attorney General couldn't join us today. But
Okay, they're always going to ask for payment in Bitcoin or in some other cryptocurrency, because that can be done globally, and it's while it's not completely anonymous, there are ways that I can move that money around after I've gotten it to make it very difficult to trace it back to me, and then
right.
I can launder it fairly easily.
Which is why one of the concerns around Bitcoin and those kind of currencies are occurring on the federal level, and they're trying to figure out how to regulate and what to do with that. But
Right.
we do have a question, and then I wanted to give another example, and maybe we can talk about a few other ways that businesses can protect themselves or get information, further information. So there's a question here about what is MFA?
MFA. Did I say MFA or did I not? I didn't say. I'm sorry. I should have been clear. MFA is multi-factor authentication. So let me give a great great. I talk about like what I'm about to say is wonderful, but let me give you a rundown of the different forms of multi-factor authentication. So in general, multi-factor authentication is if you think of standard authentication, you have a username and a password, and that's actually a very old model for authenticating. It goes back to the 60s and the 1960s. And now we have multi-factor authentication where you have a username, a password, and then something else. And that something else can come in, typically comes in three different forms. The first and the least secure version of that is that you're probably most familiar with is you get a text message from the provider. So there are a number of banks that when I log into the bank, I click a button, it says send a text message, and a code arrives on my phone, and I enter that. That is not the most secure version because the problem with that is that code is sent in plain text. Anybody who is around with a piece of equipment can read that code off the airwaves. Additionally, that can be I can be victimized by something called a SIM swap attack, where somebody takes my phone number and then they receive the text message and I don't receive it because my phone's been kicked off the network, and they have said, okay, I'm Joe Kerrigan, and now I have lost my phone. Please give me a new SIM. Here's my new SIM. Please redirect all my information to here. So if they already have my username and password, then they can get my access to any account that I have where I use SMS as my two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. That's kind of difficult to do, but it is possible to do. Next is I have one here, these tokens, right? These tokens here, or an authentication app. These are the same technology. If you use Google Authenticator on your phone, it generates a time-based code based on some cryptographic seed, which is unknown. And if you don't know the seed, then the method is pretty secure. However, at some point in time, that seed has to be exchanged. So if you're using an app like Google Authenticator, that's a little less secure than maybe buying one of these RSA tokens or having something else. But that's kind of cost prohibitive for companies to offer that. So they may offer just using a straight Google Authenticator app, and that's okay. But that seed does have to be transmitted across the internet, and that transmission is secure and encrypted. But then it's displayed on your screen, so there is a chance for that to be intercepted, although it's a lower chance than it's more secure than an SMS message. And then finally, the last option for multi-factor authentication is something like a YubiKey, something that uses universal two-factor. This is a USB device that you plug in and it's got all the cryptography built into it. And this right here is the user interface. All you have to do is push that. That's not biometric. It's just a button. And I use this to authenticate to my Google accounts. So, and into my password manager. So I put this into my computer, I enter my password, and it says, okay, now we're going to tell you to push the button on your YubiKey. And I push the button, and something called a challenge response, which is a cryptographic protocol, happens. And I am authenticated because I have verified that I am in possession of the actual private keys, the cryptographic private keys on this device. So that's a summary of multi-factor authentication. I hope that answers the question, but it is far more secure than username and password. We as humans are very bad at generating passwords that we can remember.
Absolutely. So there's another, I guess, more of a comment about deleting the code afterwards, correct?
Yeah, I don't know that that's necessary. I delete them simply because I clear up my text messages with it, but those codes, if it's implemented correctly, those codes should be one-time use codes. In other words, I get a code sent to me, I enter it, and then that code is no good anymore. So it's not really necessary. I do it. I do it just because I don't like all the clutter in my text messages, but I don't think it's necessary.
Gotcha. Thank you. And I noticed that some of the participants are some of our nonprofit partners. And, you and I have talked before about our nonprofit partners in cybersecurity. And I just wanted to share that in case you think this cybersecurity is only for individual consumers or for businesses, it also applies to nonprofits. Because
absolutely.
Back in I know I've shared this with you before, Joe, but back in the day when we were actually in person in our offices, I received an email from our boss, and looked like it was really from her, email address.
Yep.
And it was, "Are you in the office?" Very conversational. And I was like, "Yes." And then I was like, I can see her. She knows I'm in the office. The next email was, "Because I need you to transfer some money."
Right.
Like,
right.
First of all, red flag, all the red flags and bells and whistles started going off. And, I wanted to respond, "Nice try," but I was like, just leave it,
Just right. I have fallen for this as well. Our executive director is Anton DeBura, and somebody sent an email to me from a Gmail address that says, "Hey, are you in the office right now?" And I responded immediately, "Yes." And I grabbed my notebooks, because this is something that he would say to me if he wanted me to come down and meet him. So I grabbed my notebook and a pen, and I went down to his office, and his office is dark. And I'm sitting there, and our head of administration comes out, and she goes, "I think that was a fake email." I'm like, I can't believe I fell for it.
They do it well,
Yeah, I mean,
So-
and I went back up and looked at it, and sure enough, it was coming from an email address that someone set up to look like it was coming from Tony. So they were spear phishing us, and they were doing a pretty good job. They got me to just click response to click the response. But in the event that it was quickly filtered out by our email providers, which is at the university. So it didn't go any further. But I was totally expecting to see them start with a gift card scam, because that was the rash of scams we were seeing going around.
Gotcha. Well, you gave a lot of great tips on how businesses can protect themselves. A couple other resources. This webinar is actually being co-sponsored by the Maryland Cybersecurity Council. And so if anyone Googles that, there's a whole host of resources on that site as well. And the Small Business Administration for the U.S. government has a lot of checklists and different things that people can access and see whether or not they're protecting themselves adequately. But is there anything else that stands out for you as far as being a great resource for small businesses?
Great resource for small. I should have an answer to this question. I don't think of anything right off the top of my head. If you're going to be running a small business, I would definitely look into finding a company. I can't make any specific endorsements for these companies, but there are lots of companies out there that offer training on social engineering attacks, particularly with phishing. They'll send emails into your company for modest fees that are essentially training opportunities for your staff. The one thing I absolutely recommend is when you are doing this, don't make this punitive. Use this as a learning opportunity. Don't embarrass people. Don't fire people because they fail phishing tests. Everybody is going to fall for a phishing test at some point in time. It's just going to happen. You've got to remember that that these are people who are being victimized by criminals. And we don't penalize people when they get mugged walking down the street, even though they probably could have done something better that would have prevented them from getting mugged. But they're actually victims of criminal enterprises.
And so it's important to do employee training.
It's important to do employee training, right? And then to not be punitive with that training. That's my advice. So, yeah.
I know there's some other resources on the National Cybersecurity Alliance. The Federal Trade Commission has resources. And then NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, has a small business cybersecurity corner. And then there's a toolkit on the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's website under the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So there are a lot of resources, and it may take a little time to kind of filter through them, but it's really worth small businesses' time to go out there and take a look at them and see what they need to do proactively versus waiting for that Bitcoin message that small business can bear on.
Right.
Great. Well, are there any other questions? We'll just wait a couple seconds, see if anybody has any other questions here. And again, this is recorded and going to be put on Cash Academy. There is one more webinar in our Small Business Success Week. That's tomorrow, Friday. And it is by Kiva Baltimore to talk about how to access affordable funding for businesses. So if anyone's interested, please sign up and attend that tomorrow as well. Again, my apologies to the Attorney General's staff for getting the time mixed up, and we will certainly make sure that we get that straight and invite him back on again. So I don't see any other questions at this point. So Joe, just thanks again so much for all the great information. Once again, you're a skilled presenter, and we really appreciate all the information that you've provided. Thank everyone for joining us today, and I will end the recording and hope that everyone stays safe. Thanks, everyone.